Well, hello again, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back aboard Titanic. Once again, we are going to cover the second class spaces aboard the ship today, which is sort of the forgotten class. Everyone remembers the opulence of first and the immigrant hopes and dreams of third, but not so much the regular people that were traveling in second class. So, we'll head through some of those spaces today. You may be thinking, however, that this does not appear to be second class. This looks more like a closet. And you would be correct. This is indeed a linen closet down, I believe, on C deck. This space is most easily accessible through the second class promenade, which is why I'm showing it now rather than through the crew spaces. The first part, or the second part, of the tour, despite the fact that this would be exclusively for crew's use. This appears to be clean linen storage in here, so it's very, very interesting. Not particularly. It's a mundane space. There's sort of a corridor here. I think the drying rooms are probably behind these doors for the purposes of drying linens and whatnot. There's a fire axe on the wall back there, just in case you need to let Jack out of his handcuffs. Anyway, more linen storage. These sacks probably were soiled linens. I don't know precisely why they'd be stored with nicely folded ones, but here we are. There's a spiral staircase here, and this is why I'm showing this space now. We can go up this spiral staircase, and I do apologize if this makes anyone dizzy, but this is just the way we have to go. Through this door would be the first and second class galley. We can't go in there, but it would be right through there, and it would make sense to have a direct access to linen storage from the galleys, because you might need tablecloths or towels or something of that nature in the galley spaces, so it would make sense to have staircases down there. But at the top, and again, the reason why we're doing things this way, is a door that leads out to the second class exterior promenade. We can maybe take a peek down. Well, maybe not. It's kind of hard to see. There's just a spiral staircase shaft. We can pop out to the exterior second class promenade. And as you can see, there are lifeboats out here. We have a gorgeous view of the sea. The 3 forward funnels are that way, and right here is the number 4 funnel, the dummy funnel, which wasn't quite a dummy. That's somewhat of a misnomer. There were, since we just saw we're directly above the galleys, ventilation ducts from the galleys and light and air shafts down into the kitchen spaces that are brought up through this number 4 funnel, as well as, since we're standing on the raised roof over the first class smoke room, there was an actual fireplace downstairs in the smoke room that we'll see tomorrow in tomorrow's first class tour. But smoke from that fireplace, the only real one aboard, the rest were electric, is brought up through this chimney uptake, and that would go up through the 4th funnel, right through there. So it wouldn't have been unusual to see smoke coming out of the 4th funnel, just not quite as much, since it's not exhausting the boiler rooms themselves. I think there's other ventilation shafts and things through some of these doors, but right here, there's grates in this one, so you can see inside. The ship she carried passengers' dogs that might need to cross the Atlantic, and in here was the kennels. Were the kennels for Titanic's passengers' pets. If there were dogs or cats on board, this is where they were kept. You can't really see too much in there because the lights appear to be off. But there's little kennels in there. I don't know if they keep more than 1 dog per kennel. Probably not. That would potentially be bad. Unless they were from the same family, I guess. But they had this raised roof part of this promenade here. The first class promenade second class promenade, where stewards could walk the passengers' dogs. They could get their daily exercise, so they weren't cooped up in there for the whole crossing, which would, for those that own dogs, understandably that would not be good if they were kept up in the kennels the entire time. There's deck chairs up here. I don't know how much of that there would B because there were dedicated promenades elsewhere for lounging, but it makes sense to have deck chairs up here. It's sort of a sun deck. The raised decks were often called sun decks by the crew. Whether or not that was the official term for these kinds of platforms or not matters little, but underneath you can just see on the sides of these raised roofs windows into the first class smoke room to provide light down there. So this is the second class portion of the boat deck promenade, so named again because there's lifeboats here. It's the boat deck. All covered up with their canvas coverings for now. Through there would be the engineer's promenade. We may be able to see that later on. This weird looking structure here, this is the raised skylight cover for the aft first class staircase. There were two of those famous domed, fluted shaped staircases that you see in the movie, one forward, one aft. We'll see both of them later on in our first class tour, but that's the skylight cover for that dome, or at least for the aft one. We can head aft again. This is the raised, this separate structure here. The deck house for the second class entrance. Up top you can see an elevator gear mechanism housing with vents to exhaust any electrical fumes that may be resulting from that. Generally you wouldn't want that kind of thing, but it may take place, I suppose. These are air vent shafts that go all the way down through various spaces. Looking over the rail here, again, this is the second class promenade, but we can look down on the first class promenade down on A deck. This may be the only promenade space on board where another class overlooks first, which is somewhat of a novelty there. Then of course we have the main mast reaching up towards the sky there. This beam could stretch a canvas awning over the first class space below us to protect from sunlight or rain or whatever may be falling from the sky. The four lines stretched between the two masts that you can see running the length of the ship, that is the telegraph, the wireless telegraph aerial, essentially the antenna for the ship's wireless machine. So that's what those are. Now we can head inside and make our way down into the ship. This is the forward second class stairs. There's this almost 2-deck high vault where the staircase passes through with these double-sized windows with daylight pouring in. All of the walls in here are oak paneled, much like the first class spaces we'll see tomorrow. And I don't know if this cane furniture here are placeholders for this particular program, or if there's some overlap in the furniture between first and second class, because these are very similar to some of the first class cane chairs that you'll see throughout stairwells and whatnot. So we're on the boat deck level there. We can head on down. There's a stained glass window here that leads into both a light and air ventilation shaft, and then if I peek through you can see some colors bleeding through the frosted glass here. That is the pantry that services both the first class smoke room and veranda and palm court cafe. There's no second class spaces here on A deck, so there's just this landing here. There's no doors, but this window does look through into some of the first class service spaces that were on A deck. So we can continue on downstairs deeper into the ship to the A deck level, B deck level. On this deck was the second class smoke room, which is actually, as you can see, this and some of the other second-class public rooms are in some ways nicer than those found in first. First class was definitely ornate. You'll see some of that tomorrow, but it wasn't over the top. There wasn't the marble and the golden curtains that some people like in popular imagination to think that the most luxurious ship in the world might have had, but it was definitely a step above spaces like this. But I've always found that the second class spaces are homier, more comfortable, and more conducive to relaxing than some of the first class spaces of equivalent use. But as you can see, there's some brandy glasses and matches scattered throughout here. This would be for the domain of the men after dinner to come and discuss global affairs and things of that nature, maybe play a game of bridge or poker or something of that nature. I don't think they would have been able to actually play for money. I think there were some restrictions by the line to prevent passengers from being scammed by card sharks. But you can nevertheless play cards in here, or chess, or whatever you may have. Read a book, perhaps. There's some writing desks in here as well, if you wanted to write a postcard home. There's a recessed alcove sofa in here that I really like. I like this fitting in here, the brass clock mounting there. I don't know precisely what would have been stored in here. Perhaps cigars in these cabinets? Or something to that effect? And while this was predominantly the domain of men, I don't think Titanic or her sister Olympic had any specific women aren't allowed in here type rules. I think it was just sort of a custom, but they wouldn't necessarily have frowned on women visiting the smoke rooms in any class. There certainly wasn't any signage to that end to prevent women from entering in here. And downstairs in first class, you'll see that there's some public spaces that you had to pass through the smoke room to get to, so it would have been weird to outright prevent women from going through it, at least. This landing here has doors to the elevators. We'll see the car shortly on a deck below. But I wanted to pop out here to the open B-deck second class promenade. It's not quite a full loop because the staircase blocks it. Actually, both staircases block it. They're in the way. But you've got this exterior promenade here. This is a luggage hatch cover, which would have been serviced by the electric cranes on the deck above. You can hoist predominantly first and second class baggage through there to the baggage holds below. And in here, as you can see, and we'll get a better idea of why this is significant downstairs. This is the aft staircase, the highest level on the B-deck level, and the mainmast, which is directly above us, right there, passes through this room and the foyers below us, which is kind of odd because it does take up a significant amount of space. You need the structural footing, obviously, so it's a structural thing, but in terms of the use of the interior spaces, it does present kind of a conundrum, and we'll see that in a bit. There is this fun little covered portion of the promenade here, with these big picture windows into the smoke room, letting in daylight. Not direct daylight, of course, because this is sort of covered up, but any daylight is welcome on board a ship. And this is kind of a good spot to see how A deck and the first class promenades above overhang the B deck level just a little bit. Not much, a couple of feet, but they were a little bit wider, or it was a little bit wider than the decks going all the way down, so they overhang the side of the ship a bit. Go back into the second class entrance here. Forward entrance. We can go down another deck to the C deck level, which, if I am not mistaken, is the level at which our elevator car is currently sitting. So we can go in here. There's a little bench here. It's kind of dark, it's hard to see, but You sort of get the idea of how this would have functioned. There would have been an... Oops. I don't know why Chrome has decided that it needs to notify me at the moment, but it has. We have an elevator gate here, these iron gates that slide shut to close them, and then we've got our little activation thing panel. Your little light that would illuminate there, and then we can see on the outside of the car, it's kind of covered up by the door, here's the deck indicator panel. So this is the call button, just like a modern elevator, and then since it's illuminated at C deck, we know that it is indeed at the C deck level. Of course, there's lots of ways to know that, but these are electrical distribution panels behind these doors. Lots and lots of switches and fuse boxes and things to control the lights for just not only the entrance here, but perhaps a second-class library, which we'll go into in a moment. But we'll step out onto the promenade here, the enclosed second-class promenade. This is sort of to prevent the elements from inhibiting passengers from going on their morning stroll. In the event that things are particularly nasty outside, they still have a place to walk. First class is directly forward through these doors here, so we won't go in there yet. Excuse me. You can see we got this loop passing through here, and there's some fans and heaters. If I remember right, there's some heating elements in this round drum looking thing, and then air is forced over those heating elements and spun around a bit and then injected into the spaces around it to heat them up. Kind of like a very extremely large space heater that you might have in your bedroom in the winter, except they had lots of them around the ship. Here's the lower view of the baggage hatch here, or cargo hatch. I don't remember precisely which hole this goes down into. I believe it is... must be the aft cargo holds then, so not for baggage, those are forward. So I was just looking at my deck plans there. So these are for drainage. This is an enclosed promenade, so I'm not sure how much water would actually be making it all the way in here, but in the event that there was water entering this space, and these are present on exterior decks as well, not just here, water would flow down this little dip on the exterior outboard sides of the deck, and then you can see there's a gap there for the water to flow through, and then there'd be outlets likely out here on the well deck for the water to pour over the side, so that there wasn't accumulating water on the decks up here, because you wouldn't want to end up in a storm trying to get out here to go tie something down if you're a crew member and you have to wade through a couple of inches of water that's just sloshing around up here in a big gale. These doors could be opened when the ship is docked to let passengers or cargo on. Probably cargo, given that there's a hatch right here. But I imagine it could be for people to board as well. But we'll keep on heading inside. There is the library here. The second-class library. As you can see, there's some glasses of half-consumed wine scattered about, lots of books. I love this space. It's probably one of my favorite rooms on board. Just the inlaid oak paneling in here, somewhat restrained, yet still classical columns. This bookcase, this mahogany bookcase, I want this in my house. I don't know, there's some board games scattered around here as well, like chess sets and things. I don't know if you'd have to check these out, or if they'd just be freely available. I know the books you could check out for the voyage, and you could take one to your cabin. But there was a passenger named Lawrence Beasley, a second-class passenger, who was a science teacher in England. And he spent a lot of his time in here. He was an extremely observant individual, which makes sense for a science teacher, right? But he is also one of the reasons why we know, and I'm going back upstairs to show this because I think it was up here in the smoke room, that Titanic had a slight 2-ish degree port list for the duration of her maiden voyage, probably because of the coal that was shifted out of the number 5 coal bunker. Because of the little coal fire that was smoldering down there, they were shifting coal around, so the ship's weight was slightly off, balance was slightly off. So she rolled with a slight hesitation to port. So the horizon, and the reason I think it's up here in the smoke room is because this is the main second-class public room where you could see the horizon from the windows. The library is too inboard. There's an enclosed promenade in the way, and the dining saloon, which we'll see in a bit, is too far down. The horizon is, like, invisible above us, or would be above those windows. I think it's this room where he would be sitting, Lawrence Beasley would be sitting in one of these chairs, and he would notice that as she rolled, the horizon on the port side never quite went as high among the frame of the windows as that on the starboard. So he deduced that the ship was actually listing ever so slightly to port. It wasn't really a noticeable thing that anyone had pointed out in their day-to-day business, but science teachers being science teachers, he made note of everything. And his account, he did survive the sinking, is a significant portion of, or represents a significant portion of our knowledge about Titanic. Especially second class aboard Titanic, which was otherwise relatively scantily documented. There's again, here in the library, there's some writing tables in here with some White Star Line stationery. Stationery with "From aboard RMS Titanic" would become considerably more valuable after the ship sank. Not a whole lot of stationery with that letterhead exists. But leaving the library here, you'll look out this door heading forward and you're like, what is this? Or heading aft, excuse me. What is this? Why is there this giant mast passing directly in front of the door? It seems odd that if there's a lot of people coming in and out of this room, you wouldn't want something directly in the way. This is just one of those weird design things about Titanic, and James Panka, the creative director of Titanic Honor and Glory, in one of the official stream tours of this program, mused that this could be because they wanted extra table space, and if you have 2 doors and 1 table, that cuts out 2 writing desks that you could otherwise have provided for the second-class passengers, and space is always a premium on board ships. So they made the decision to put this door along the center line. It also allows for this excuse me, spot to be an anchor for the orchestra. The other day in third class, I mentioned in the third class general room, which was furnished with a piano, that third class often had to provide their own entertainment. They were never provided with performances by the ship's orchestra. Well, here in the second class entrance foyer, there was a piano as well, and you can see by this music stand that this would have been an anchor point for a trio of the ship's orchestra, which they'd probably play here either before or after dinner. And it's interesting, I don't know if that means, and I guess there might be a dining schedule outside of the saloon downstairs to let us know about this, but the timing of first and second class dinner, if it was offset or not, to facilitate the orchestra playing in multiple places, because they would need at least a trio outside the first class restaurants, the dining saloon, and the second class dining saloon. But anyway, there's never enough musicians. As a musician, we never have enough musicians. Heading further downstairs, to D-Deck, where the dining saloons, except for the third class one, reside. You can actually take a look down some second-class corridors, and I can use this to illustrate a point that I may have already made. But Titanic is often imagined to be this vast ship with palatial interiors. There would be no reason on a ship this large to have tiny, claustrophobic corridors like this, but especially in the lower parts of second and third class, and then crew spaces, there were corridors that were at times 18 inches across. This one's a little bit wider than that, but not significantly. So, since space even on a ship 882.5 feet in length is always used with the utmost efficiency, and there's really no reason for them to have corridors much wider than this, because this is as wide as you would need to function as a corridor. There's also these linen cabinets. I think it's linen cabinets at the end of a lot of these corridors. There's linen storage all over the ship. Linen rooms, linen boxes like this, linen closets to facilitate stewards' needs as they go around and restock cabins with towels or bed sheets, whatever the passengers may need. There'd be lavatories, likely, in some of these spaces along the center line for plumbing uptakes. Because again, there weren't a whole lot of ensuite bathrooms. You had to go down the hall to a gents' or ladies' lavatory to do your business in the middle of the night, since it wouldn't be until Olympics refit, I believe in the 20s, when a lot of her higher cabins, and even some in tourist class, the rebranded third class arrangement, received ensuite bathrooms. In here is the second class dining saloon. It's quite a grand space, even here in second class, almost more inviting than the one in first, which we'll see tomorrow. As you can see, like in third class, there are long tables here as well, unlike the intimate, smaller table settings that we'll see in the specialty restaurants, the 3 specialty restaurants and the dining saloon in first class. There were still long arrangement dining tables in second. But a very comfortably oak-paneled dining saloon here. I love the wood grains and everything. A paneled ceiling, the light fixtures. Those are serving dish cabinets, I believe, along the bulkhead there. Mirrors to further provide the illusion of size to this space, further enlarge it. Swivel portholes along the exterior of the room provide daylight, even here on D-deck. Then there's buffet sideboards here, and an upright piano. We will see in the third class dining saloon, the first class, classes are confusing, dining saloons were both used for divine services on Sunday mornings. I believe in second class they offered both Catholic and Protestant services, but maybe it was just Protestant. I know in first it was only Protestant services offered. But they would use this room for church on Sundays as well, since Titanic lacked any chapel for any class, so they improvised. So the piano served as an orchestra mounting point during dinner and for church on Sundays. I think these are drawers, actually. There's just no hardware for them, so maybe there's like a little lip that you could pull on. But maybe I'm just imagining that. Maybe it's just paneling. On the other side of this wall is the first and second class galley, because in between the first and second class dining saloons was the giant kitchen, and it was the largest kitchen on board. It spanned the whole width of the ship and more than 100 feet of her length. I don't know precisely how long it was, actually. It could have been upwards of 200 feet, but regardless, it was in between the 2 dining saloons, so that food could just be brought out both ends, and the stewards could just pop out either direction into the dining saloon to serve the passengers. And then these little carts allowed for staging of things, dishes and things. Probably used dishes. Or maybe they put desserts on here? I don't really know what this would be used for. Oh, and there's little covers for these windows. I've never noticed that before. That they could pull down and cover them up. And then hooks to fasten the shade. That's fun. Or you could open the windows to provide ventilation. You'd crank the little thingy on the side of it, and the whole thing would swivel, because it mounts along this center point here. Either that or vertically, and would rotate vertically. I don't know precisely which way, because it's a little, well, this would probably be the latch, actually. But I like this room. I'm not sure about the pineapples. I don't think they're decorative. I assume it's actually for eating, but to be honest, I don't know how you would serve that. Because everybody's got their own cutlery here. Just don't want to just appoint someone at the table. Here, you cut up the pineapple. Various notice boards. Oh, here. Like I was saying, divine services held in the saloon on Sundays at 10:30 a.m. They may have been at the same time for the first and second class saloons, or perhaps they were staggered so the captain could attend both. I don't know. When we go to the first class saloon, there will probably be a sign with the time for there, and then we can compare them to see if they overlapped or not. We're not on C deck, obviously, but the elevator still indicates, so they've gone and made sure that in this model that it tells you it's on C deck, every deck, in case you need to go catch the lift. Although it doesn't go anywhere, so good luck. Like in the third class covered promenade or open space, or I guess interchangeable terms, we have this map here, this wonderful map of White Star Line steamship routes that would have been back illuminated, and there's hinges, I think, so the entire thing can flip up, perhaps to change a light bulb. It's off at the moment, but... And I think that blob, is that an island chain, or is that the northern part of Antarctica, and then the rest of the continent just isn't here? I don't know. Unless it's the Falkland Islands. It looks too big for that. I'm embarrassing myself. I should know my geography. I don't know what that is. If anyone's from there, probably not, but if you are, let me know. You can yell at me. Through these doors, when we were on the crew passage, Scotland Road, I mentioned there were doors to the second class stairway. This is the other side of those doors. And since it is 50%, not 100% of the ship available, we have this velvet cable preventing us from going further down, although I think it probably is functionally identical to this deck down there, so it's not that much of a loss yet, but we'll eventually get to where we can see everything. There's a curtain. We can head aft. We can do that in a minute. This is the second class gangway door, or one of them. There'd be one on either side of the ship. And this is actually, I think, a gang plank that you could take off of the ceiling here and rig up out through this door as a ramp, so that, I guess, so that you don't trip and die on your way in. It's kind of a Spartan entranceway compared to what we'll see in first class tomorrow. I guess there's some oak paneling over there, which is impressive, but it's not quite the first impression that you get in first class, and you'll see what I mean in the next part. This is a closed watertight door, I believe. So one of the horizontal doors that you have to close manually with a crank from the deck above. In its closed position. And in here is, I believe, the chief steward for second class. So he has like a joint office and cabin in here. So this is where he would both live and work. He's got a desk with a window so he can take inquiries from various passengers, whatever they may need. And a desk lamp that doubles as a bedside lamp, as you can articulate it. On the hardware mounting here, there's some switches. We've got a little calendar there. Set to April of 1912. The White Star Line frame. That's the Oceanic. There, the two-funneled White Star Liner, whose interior design heavily inspired the Olympic class. In fact, Oceanic was originally supposed to receive an identical sister called Olympic. But that ship was never built, and the name Olympic was passed to Titanic's elder sister. He's got a dresser, wardrobe, another one of those folding wash basin things. And I don't know if this little wire thing is to hold soap, although if it was, you'd think it would drip everywhere. So maybe it's just for toiletries? You'd put something in there? I don't know. That's a rack for your luggage. In some cabins, they'd have a fold-down bunk here, but not in this one, because there's only ever one man that would sleep in here, the chief steward. He had a cabin to himself to make room for this desk, but the furniture in here is probably similar to most of the second-class cabins around here, with the main difference being there would be more than one bunk in this room. I think second class was the highest class where they would bunk passengers who didn't previously know each other in the same room. I know they did in steerage, and they did not in first. So maybe they did in second class as well, but obviously you didn't have to necessarily, and if you booked with your family, you could all stay in the same room. And some cabins did only have one bunk, but they'd likely be smaller than this one. I tried to show some of those contrasting layouts, except that's the only one that's available. But let's say, oh, I want to reserve a deck chair. Please, sir, can I have a deck chair? And he would write out your little ticket, and you'd probably pay whatever it was. I think it's like a shilling or two for the deck chair for the voyage. Not the case anymore, although maybe deck chairs come with your fare on Queen Mary 2, the transatlantic liner that's still operating. I don't know. We can head aft to the lower part of the other staircase here, because oh, here's some water fountains. We saw these a lot in the third-class promenade spaces, but they were elsewhere on board as well. This is the second-class purser's office window. We'll see the first-class one tomorrow, and this one's all closed up, but this is probably where you would go if you wanted a deck chair, not the steward. The steward could get you like a drink or something. I want some hot tea in the middle of the night. There's probably steward call buttons around here as well, somewhere in the vicinity, where the stewards would be able to know which cabin had pressed their call button, and then there'd be a little bell ringing by their door. Maybe a light illuminates too, I don't know. But a rack for brochures of some kind. Nothing in it now. I don't know what's down here. Maybe nothing. Maybe some treasure. This appears to be the lowest deck of this staircase, and then this is probably an assistant steward of some kind, who would also have a window that you could go to get some help, although it's closed at the moment, so he's either sleeping or just not home. But the other fun part about this particular staircase, unlike the forward one, which has an elevator shaft in this space, also, what is this, a door for ants? Anyway, we can look up. And again, the other staircase doesn't have this fun spiral view upwards, because there would be an elevator right here. But the aft one doesn't have that, so we can look up and there's daylight. You can just see the frames of the plaster ceiling up there, up at the top. So I think there's just some corridors down here. Lots and lots of cabins. Brass signs say anything? Not at the moment. Those would probably have numbers, or if they're crew members, they'll list which crew members were here. Oh, here's a steward's call button panel. So the stewards could come here if they hear the chimes ding, and they would know which cabin, based on which light was illuminated, to go bring, or at least they'd have to go and say, hello, what do you require, sir or madam? And then they would tell them, and they'd go get it from one of the pantries that would undoubtedly be located in the vicinity that I can't find because it's probably closed. Are those like little mail slots? Can you post something even while the office is closed? That would be fun. Anyway, I think that is probably the extent of what we can see in second class. I'll go topside again to get a nice view over the promenade to end on here. But as you can see, second class is sort of an intermediate level of accommodation where it's definitely a comfortable arrangement to have. Ooh, a mailbox. You could put your letters in there. That makes sense, because if you're in the library and you write on your postcard and then you're done and you come out and then it sends it, it either drops down into the bucket or maybe there's a chute that goes down to the purser's office, which would be a deck or two below us. Because no, it's on that side of the stairs, so it would have to be just in the box there. Anyway, kind of an intermediate level of accommodations here. Sunbeams. But one thing I wanted to point out in this video, and this is going to date when I'm recording these because it's well in advance of Titanic week that I'm recording all of these videos, or the anniversary week, that is, of the sinking. Vintage Digital Revival, the parent company of Honor and Glory, only just announced a new partnership with RMS Titanic Incorporated, which those who are at least somewhat familiar with the Titanic community will, or who have ever visited one of the artifact exhibitions that tour museums across the United States and around the world, RMST Inc. operates those artifact exhibitions. They, I believe, at least in some sense, own the wreck, or at least own the salvage rights to the wreck. So a partnership between Vintage Digital Revival and Titanic, RMS Titanic Incorporated, will allow the artifact exhibitions to incorporate this program and others produced by VDR in educational programming. And then for VDR, the archival materials that RMST Inc. possesses will be available for research purposes, and other elements of the development of this project and Titanic Honor and Glory can be furthered by the resources made available by this partnership. And I think the direction that VDR is going in terms of preserving just Titanic and her legacy and her stories, rather than years ago when a AAA video game project was sort of what was pitched, which would have been a ridiculously impressive accomplishment, but somewhat less aligned with Titanic Inc.'s mission to preserve Titanic's legacy. I think the current level of detail and respect, and which was always present but is now the core of this project, has really facilitated a partnership that I think is probably going to benefit enormously the broader Titanic community, which continues to grow. And perhaps, at least it is my hope, that somebody watching this video may, for lack of a better metaphor, come aboard this bizarre little community that we have that is perpetually interested in the story of this ship and the 2,200 people who lived and died aboard her. But I think this will cover it for second class. I will see you all tomorrow, I believe, for the final portion of our tour, which will be the highly anticipated, I imagine, first class spaces. A lot of the rooms from the movie will be making an appearance, although in a slightly, ever so slightly more accurate representation. Not that there was anything inherently flawed with the film, it was phenomenally displayed. But we'll move on into first class tomorrow. I want to thank everyone who may be watching for tuning in, and I'll see you in the next one. Cheerio.